You know, Sal, you've covered that team as long as anyone. You understand it as well as anyone, the ins and the outs. And you were in the locker room and other places there with them last night. What stands out the most to you after what was an absolute debacle of a finish to the season?
Good morning, Michael. The answer to your question is the mood in the locker room after the game. I was one of the last reporters. I stayed until the last player left the locker room and talked to a lot of them. And it's clear they understand that major changes are coming and they are ready for them. Listen to this.
It's very embarrassing when you go from 10-1 to losing last 6 or 7 or whatever we did, and we've done all the press conferences, we've done all the explaining, trying to, and still not getting corrected. There's probably going to be some changes. It's frustrating. Hopefully, as long as I'm playing, I don't want to have to be a part of something like this again. So that's my plan.
Lane Johnson also said these words, Greeny, quote, "No one is safe." 4 words that kind of sum things up. Major changes are coming to this football team.
So what would constitute major, I guess, is the question here, Sal, right? I mean, there were some people who will say it's incomprehensible that a head coach can take a team to a Super Bowl and 11 months later we're talking about the possibility of him getting fired. But everyone is well aware, and you living there in Philly, you hear the drumbeat of it, are well aware that that is a topic that is certainly on the table of discussion right now. What is your sense of that?
Well, we're reporters. We're not in the speculation business, but we're in the reporting business. So here's what we know and here are the facts. The bottom line is that Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the team, stood by Andy Reid for a very long time. And then he pulled the plug quickly on Chip Kelly and quickly on Doug Peterson when things went south and he didn't like the direction of the football team. So you have that. 2, the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator jobs are definitely on the chopping block. It's clear they have to make changes in both of those areas. So are you going to let Nick Sirianni, who's in the 4th year of a 5-year contract, be the navigator of that, be the steward of that, be the steward of a rebuilding that is so vast? That is the question confronting this football team and the ownership of this football team. And that what they'll do is they'll take their time. And Louis Riddick has been in that building. He understands what they do and how they do things. And they'll try to figure out what to do with the head coach. But there are a lot of options for them out there. There's Mike Vrabel. There's Bill Belichick. And the drumbeat, as you mentioned, listen, I've lived and worked in Philadelphia for almost 40 years. The fans matter in Philadelphia. And this team has lost the fans. The organization has lost the fans. The fans are important. This Eagles organization is always looking to what the fans are thinking. They're always polling their season ticket holders. And the fans matter, and they have lost the fans. They've lost people like on Joe DeCamera on WIP, Marcus Hayes on Philly.com, the guys who are the opinion shapers in Philadelphia. They've lost those guys, and it's going to be hard to get them back.
Sal, stay with us if you can here. I want to get the guys in on the conversation, but we'll have more for you. He mentioned it. You've been there. You understand that. And he brings up an interesting question. I mean, Nick Sirianni, are you going to let him be the guy who makes the decisions? If you're going to change coordinators, let's say on both sides of the ball, do you allow him to be the one who makes those decisions?
Who says Nick Sirianni was making these decisions in the first place? That's the problem. That's part of the problem. Okay? Sean Desai, I mean, do we really think that it was Nick Sirianni who had Sean Desai demoted? Do you really think that that's what happened? Do you think it was Nick Sirianni who brought Matt Patricia in? I don't know. I know what I think. Do you think that? Do you think that? So when we talk about major changes from the top down, everything is on the table. You're right. Everything should be on the table. From the way you do business, the kind of culture you set, who's making decisions, what the order is as far as, who answers to who's responsible for what. You cannot, look, this is an old Bill Walsh quote. You cannot manage what is happening on the grass from the boardroom. Okay, let the people who are down on the ground floor manage what's happening on the field. Hire the people to go ahead and let them manage it. Let them to go ahead and build out their staff. Jeff, you know a little bit something about this.
Absolutely.
You were just subjected to this. Let the people, meaning that head coach who is the CEO, manage what is happening. So put your trust in that guy. Make sure you're picking a guy who you trust to do that in the first place. Because right now, clearly, they took a step back, way back from Shane Steichen being there. from Doug Peterson being there. Remember, when they ran Doug out of there, Doug had won a Super Bowl.
They won it.
And they ran him out of there.
Right.
He won a Super Bowl. Nick got him to a Super Bowl. He didn't win a Super Bowl, so I don't understand why people would think, look, I think it's almost like a foregone conclusion that he may be gone. And the whole thing may be reset. But what I'm saying is the way in which you do business maybe needs to be reset.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Listen, from a guy who went through this, and again, mine's a blip on the radar, right? I was going in for 8 games, but when you have no authority to make those decisions that Lewis is talking about, who your guys are going to be, however that thing is set up, you have very little chance of success, and you're hoping that you hit the lottery in the Shane Steichens, the Gannons of the world, that those guys can really do it. Because when you start bringing in, and this will be the next group, right, that Sirianni's got to sit down, and I would tell you this, because I was with you, like the whole firing a coach, does that make a difference? But if everybody is clamoring for Mike McCarthy firing, if you look at like the drop from a 10-1, you heard Lane Johnson talk about it, from a 10-1 to losing 6 of 7 and getting boat race in the playoffs, like that is an implosion. We haven't seen something like that.
What did we see from him, and what is the right way for us to assess his role in this?
He definitely took a step back in this season, or this team took a step back. When you watch the answers that they provided for Jalen Hurts, there's some left to be desired. And I think that it's important, while Nick Sirianni should be called to the carpet, we have to understand that this was not a job, despite the talent that they had on that roster, that a lot of people wanted. Like, Nick Sirianni was not the #1 choice. And I think that says something about an organization that we believe to be well-run, analytically minded. There's a reason why eligible coaches, interested high-level coaches, weren't interested in subjecting themselves to that situation. And we saw those decisions pan out over the course of the season. And you can cover that up for only so long until you get to the point where players are looking around like, who's in charge? Who do I report to? Who can I trust? How long are you going to be there? Like, that stuff permeates on the field. And as someone who is not, I know you've been in there, as someone who has not been in that building, you can still see that on the field. You can feel it. You can tell that the players and the coaches in there don't feel secure in one vision for where their organization is.
And look no further. When you talk about Jalen Hurts, look no further than the offensive coordinator leaving. Like, if you look what he did with Gardner Minshew, like, are you serious? Like, Shane Steichen left that building, goes to Indianapolis, and Minshew's running this offense. They're running the football. They're doing all the things that the Eagles did last year. When you don't, and that's the indictment on Johnson. There's no identity, bro. Like, if you know Jalen Hurts, his run game ability makes them lethal to try to cover, that's what you got to call. It's just part of the business.
Let me get Sal back in here. Sal, final word.
Well, I think you go back to what Neek said, right? The answers that they provided to Jalen Hurts were not good enough. Wink Martindale blitzed Jalen Hurts in the Giants game. They had no answers. Todd Bowles blitzed 59% of the time last night. They had no answers. As Joe Buck and Troy Aikman pointed out during the game, they don't take advantage of the middle of the field. So whatever they're going to do, they have to fix Jalen Hurts. And they have to make sure whatever they do, it's about promoting what Jalen Hurts is going to do going forward. They invested $250 million on Jalen Hurts for the future of this franchise. They must focus on fixing the offensive problems first, because they're not going anywhere if they can't convert on third down. They were 0 for whatever on third down because and I sat in Todd Bowles' office last night after the game, and he said we just wanted to keep blitzing him, whether it was a run down or a passing down. Go back to what Neek said. They did not provide the answers for Jalen Hurts, and that, to me, is the key.
Very quickly, just as far as trying to put together a timeline here, what does history tell us when you told us they moved on from Chip Kelly and they moved on from Peterson? How quickly did they do that? Like, what does history tell us about how quickly a decision like this could get made?
The history says it will be done quickly if it's going to be done. Again, this is right now speculation, but go back to what Jalen Hurts said last night. He was asked, do you have confidence in Nick Sirianni? And his answer was lukewarm, weak, and generic. He said, I have confidence in everybody in this locker room. He did not specifically give a vote of confidence to his head coach when specifically asked about it. That's important, Michael.
It is almost unimaginable how badly this thing fell apart. They were in the Super Bowl 11 months ago. They're 10-1 in November. And since that point, they fell off a cliff. They genuinely looked like the worst defensive team in the entire NFL. Their offense has fallen apart and has absolutely no identity. How do you explain it?
Yeah, this is usually an indication that things are systemic, Greeny, right? So it's not just one thing. It's not just change the coordinator, everything's better. It's not just let's run the ball a little bit more and everything will get better. Jalen will get better. There's many different things, and it's not just about players playing better and playing clean football and execute. We all know that like culture, like what does that mean? What does it mean? It starts from the time you walk into the building to the way that the details are handled, the way that the communication goes, the way that people feel mentally approaching their job and the amount of time that they put in. I mean, it means it's about the confidence that you have in the relationships, all of that stuff. All of that stuff has contributed to why that's how you start losing 6 and 7 in a row after you start off 10-1 or whatever it was. Because those things start to fracture. And then you can't just kind of like put your finger in one of the holes and like, oh, okay, now it's fixed. Because now you have another one that just keeps and they just keep, when the dam breaks, it breaks. And it just flooded the entire organization. And so now what you have to do, you have to get one of them wet vacs and just come in and just like and clean it all up and start over. Quite honestly, you do. And I'm telling you, when Sal Powell says no one is safe, it truly needs to be that no one is safe. Jeffrey owns the team.
Yeah.
No one else is safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm confused, okay? I speak on behalf, I think, of a lot of football fans who, A, think of that as an organization that is the model of stability, right? That they've been so good. They were the team that had 3 first-round draft picks and all that kind of stuff lined up after they were in the Super Bowl. They were the team that took Jalen Hurts and developed him so well, a quarterback that almost no one thought was going to wind up becoming an elite NFL quarterback and turned him into that. They were in the Super Bowl a year ago. They were 10-1, all this stuff.
So
and now
can I
all
just
of a
say
sudden,
this real quick?
Yeah.
There's a difference between collecting talent, building a team. It's 2 different things.
That's right.
And every single year it's different. Bill says this all the time. I don't really care how we ended last year because that doesn't mean anything going into next year.
That's right.
I don't care how they ended the Super Bowl last year against Kansas City. It has no bearing on 2023. And 2023 should have no bearing on 2024. Well, you know what, I'll say this. Even if you kept the same people, what happened this year has no bearing on what's going to happen next year.
Exactly.
But I would not take the chance and just, when you talk about running it back, I wouldn't be just running this back.
I think there's a difference between being successful and being stable. I don't think that we would have considered this organization a stable organization as much as we consider it a successful one. And I think that the stability comes when you shake it. They got shaken this year, and their response, because last year there was no shaking.
Right.
Last year everyone was healthy. Last year they got more sacks than anyone else. All the things that go wrong for a team, like all the things that require you to test the real stability of the foundation of the organization did not happen to that team last year. This year, they shook it up, and it got worse. It got worse and worse and worse once they started to shake the true stability of this organization.
You know, Jeff, I wish everyone could have seen it. When Sal Powell was on with us about a half hour ago, one of the things he said was the first thing they need to do is fix Jalen Hurts.
No, sir.
And out of the corner of my eye, I could see how strongly you reacted, and I was up against the clock. Why did you not like that?
Yeah, because it's what you've given him. It's not fixing him. It's giving him answers to the question. Like, you knew playing Wink Martindale in New York, you knew Todd Bowles, you're going to get the blitz. And to Neek's point, we say it every week. No, if they blitz you, nobody's afraid of a 3-yard gain. You got to go beat them down the field, go make plays down the field. And the answers were always tight throws, nothing really happening. And you see the exact same blitz that the Eagles bring to Baker Mayfield. He throws it in the middle of the field for a touchdown. It was like they tried to make things difficult. This is not a fix Jalen Hurts. This is give them actual answers. There is no identity on that offense. And they went totally away from what they did well. They ran the ball 10 times with Swift, man. 10 times. Like, you're going to play a team that's going to blitz the house. You sucked against the Giants and against the blitz. Go beat them with some big none. Don't even try it, right?
I would say the coordinators that they lost last year were not only good coaches, but I think that they also brought the stability where we know who's in charge in this spot. We know who's there. But we also, you don't have, when things are going well, the order in which decisions are made, whether someone is coming above or going below you and making decisions behind your back, that does not become a problem because the result is success.
Working. That's right.
When things start to break down, then people start looking around about like, well, this ain't work. That ain't what I wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah.
You told me I had to do that. These are situations, and then there's no impact, or it has to permeate the team. That's something that everyone can feel. And while I'm not in the locker room, I can see that game and say, there's more going on than
just look at the players.
Yeah.
Look at Lane's. Like,
What specifically? What
I mean, when Lane is sitting there going, you know what, like, just him standing there when they were interviewing him, obviously outside the locker room, you could tell that he was just like, this is not just a take this player out, plug this guy in, take this coach out, and plug this. This is a little bit more systemic. This is a little bit more ingrained here. We lost our way.
Yeah, absolutely.
We lost our Lane Johnson is an all-pro.
Yeah.
And he looked like a guy who's like, hey,
unsure.
I don't quite know what's going to happen here.
And let me say this, because we've kind of danced around this thing. But with Howie Roseman, when you're talking about everybody has to be, if Sirianni is not making the decisions of who the defensive coordinator is going to be, and midway through he's getting pressure from Roseman to make a change that he's not comfortable with, or even offense. I have no idea. But if all that is filtering down, and you talk about there's nothing stable about that situation, because people get swayed by fans. And again, Bill Polian had this saying, when you start thinking like a fan, you're going to be watching games like a fan, right? And so that if that's coming from the top down, there is no way to fix, unless everybody really is on the block.
A smart coach told me this one time, and I've heard people like maybe use this before on TV, but I was told this way back. In the NFL, it's very, very, very difficult to win in spite of dysfunction.
That's right.
You want to win because of the fluidity of communication and harmony and culture. In Philly, it looks like this year they were trying to win in spite of a lot of other things not being very good.
Yeah.
And that only lasts so long.
That's right.
And when the dam breaks, it's going to break.
Is this about the coach? Does the owner need to make significant changes? If there's no leadership there, then who needs to bring it?
When you cycle through a bunch of coaches in a short period of time, and there are some things that are still stable there, I think that leadership can come from another place in the organization. And I think that when that happens, we have to the coach is like a CEO, as we make that analogy all the time. Because if a company starts to fail, we look at the coach. No matter whether it's because the market changed or whatever, the climate change, the cost of goods sold has gone up, it don't matter. That's the result. So I think to dig deeper and understand what's actually happened with this team, it's too easy. If you see how major the problems were and how long-lasting the problems were there this season and how systemic the problems were across the entire team, it seems unfair to say, hey, it's just that guy.
No.
It's just the coach. It seems like more.
What did Andy Reid do since he left Philadelphia?
Yep.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, did Andy really need to be why do coaches change places?
Right.
Okay, what happens?
Yeah.
What happens? It's usually not because, well, X and O's, he became dumb, or he's not a good leader anymore, or Andy's competency was never in question, his credibility was never in question, his ability to impact others. The three things we talk about with leadership was never in question. But he was sent down the road.
Yeah.
Then in comes Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
What happened? He was sent down the road. Then here comes Nick Sirianni. And Nick Sirianni wasn't the first person who was supposed to get that job. There was a bunch of other people. He may be sent down the road.
I mean, you got to be fair. You skipped over Doug Peterson, which they won a Super Bowl.
You know what?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? But there's certain things that have remained constant.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to start looking at those constant things.
Yeah, they've had three, not counting Pat Shurmur was an interim, they've had three coaches since Andy Reid left, which was only after the 2012 season. That's not that long when you consider how much winning they've done.